Lake Society magazine is Minneapolis' premier target market boutique lifestyle and design publication. It embodies the unique lifestyles and design of the Minneapolis City Lakes neighborhoods. From Lake of the Isles to Lake Harriet, it showcases the best in local design projects by both premier builders, architects, and interior designers in this area. Lake Society magazine has the look and feel of a national publication with glossy covers, high-end finishes. It's mailed directly to upper bracket single-family homeowners in the City Lakes area, and it's the perfect local coffee tabletop publication. Subscriptions can also be available through the website lakesocietymagazine.com. Additionally, publisher and founder Karen Steckel has over 27 years in the local magazine publishing industry and has a passion for high-end photography and quality graphics. Her commitment to quality, visual simplicity, and beauty are strongly reflected in her beautiful Lake Society magazine. Today we had Amanda Maday on the podcast, and it was just a real joy to have her on. We had met maybe 6-7 months ago, and she is a phenomenal talent in her team in the commercial design space. We talked a little bit about her background being in a reality TV and HGTV, and they just wrapped up season 5 of Rock the Block. And so just kind of more of a side thing, great for expanding her network across the country. But we spent most of the podcast talking about brand and hospitality. And we really dove deep on those two topics. And so I think if you are looking to sort of understand your own brand of your own company and what that might mean to attract your clients, as well as just kind of open up your mind to maybe spend more time thinking about your brand, I think you're going to really find a lot of value in this episode. So without further ado, here's the Curious Builder podcast. Welcome to the Curious Builder podcast. I'm Mark Williams, your host. Today, I am joined with Amanda Maday from Studio Gray. Welcome, Amanda.
Thank you. And yes, you said it right. So that's very good. I was
laughing before we started here that it looks like it's spelled Mada or Maday, and you're like, nope, it's Mayday. You're on the island, write that in the sand.
Exactly. Yep. So, they won't know to stop.
Actually, I just noticed in the paper, I think it was a week ago, where someone wrote or help in the sand out of fern leaves, and it was this island. And I guess this island is notorious for people going fishing and
getting stranded.
Getting stranded. Like they've picked up people here fairly regular.
Okay. All right. Well, I think I would spell help anyways, just because it's a little bit shorter. So less ferns together. That too.
Which I don't even know what it stands for. Well, this podcast is starting off great.
Bring a daiquiri or something like that.
If you knew you were going to get lost, I mean, maybe you want to bring a sat phone or GPS.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Studio Gray. You had reached out to me last summer. I think I toured your new facility in the fall already. I mean, time goes by.
It's almost a year ago now.
Tell us a little bit about what Studio Gray is and what you do, and then let's dive a little into your history, because you have a very robust background that I'm very excited to get into before we get into what you're doing today.
Yeah, at Studio Gray, we're a commercial hospitality designer, so we focus on anything from restaurants, lodging, hotels, to workplace, retail, multifamily, kind of all the commercial design projects. So we are an architectural designer working with clients to, start from floor plans all the way through construction, and through, them opening the doors. And so we're a small boutique firm that really just kind of dives into more of the creative side of design, definitely focuses on more of this high-end look, no matter what your budget is. So we get to kind of do all different types of projects in that commercial field.
That's amazing. I want to talk a lot about that. And before we kind of dive into the meat of that, give us a little bit more of your backstory. I was reading a little bit on, your website. You have 12 years as a designer, and I'll just read this because there's so many for multiple design shows, Rock the Block, Bath Crashers, House Crashers, Kitchen Crashers. There's a lot of crashing going on in the design here. Blog Cabin, America's Most Desperate Kitchens, and Rustic Reno. Basically, actually, I'm glad the podcast started out with Mayday. You had the perfect name. It sounds like you were a rescuer to these disasters. Is that about sum up?
Well, I mean, I guess maybe almost. It is kind of funny. I, was working as a commercial designer. It's my full-time job, and was reached out to by an old kind of elementary school friend. And she was saying they needed a designer for their Crasher series. And I was like, okay, I'll give it a shot. I can do it on the side. What does it all entail? And it's fast. I mean, they're really fast from, design through to the actual build, which, doesn't take place in 5 days. It's a week, but that's still crazy. It's all the prep work ahead of time that is just insane. And so I did one episode and I fell in love with it. I was like, this is so interesting. And getting to see that like behind the scenes sort of field of, production design and TV is just on a whole nother level. It was just really fun and unique. And you make good friends, I think, with the crew there pretty quickly because you are in it all day long. It's stressful. And so, yeah, I think it was 13 seasons later with that specific show, and then just met some of the producers and they recommended me to more and more television shows, and I don't know, they're fun. So I would call it more of a hobby, if I could call it that. Just to know it's not what we do all day long, but whenever we get the call, we're like, oh, well, we haven't done one in a while. It's kind of fun. It's quick. Let's see what we have, the bandwidth for.
Tell me a little bit about that. I think a lot of people would glamorize, the HD TVs. And I know just talking to some other people that have been, there's very little that's glamorous about it. It sounds, and correct me if I'm wrong, so I want to hear you talk a little bit about it, but, it doesn't pay well. It's a lot of work. It's very stressful. And yet people still sort of clamor to do it. Is it because you are going to get future work? It's a reputation builder. Like, why do it?
I mean,
or first of all, is my statements, are those accurate?
I would say yes, 100%. Yeah, and I mean, to each their own. Everyone has kind of a different agenda for it. But for myself and my company specifically, it was to kind of meet new people on a national level. So some of these shows were in California, some in, Washington. So I was getting to travel all over and meet people, different construction crews, different producers, just different business owners in all different parts of the country. And so it was really a strategy about just trying to, market ourselves a little bit more on a higher level than just locally, and getting to do design work that technically doesn't have a client is like the best thing ever. So if I don't get paid as much to do it, but I can explore new ideas and new things and new, possibilities that maybe someone would hesitate on as a homeowner or whatever it is, you can kind of like take some of those liberties and stretch the boundaries a little bit more. So it was like a good training exercise or just explorative, design work to really see what worked well.
And looking back, would you A, do it again, and B, how many years has it been since your last show?
We just finished one, Rock the Block season 5.
Okay, so you're still
it just finished airing. So we were done in November of last year. That was
okay. So my question isn't going to apply. Like if you go back to the beginning and change something, you're still in it.
Well,
so,
you could still ask that question. I think the last season, love the crew, love the group that keeps asking us back. It was very stressful just with the time. Like we were just behind on the build. And so everyone was just stressed because in TV, there is no tomorrow. Like it is today. And it needs to happen now. And just the crew and the talent, the on-screen designers, like everyone just was really feeling the stress of it all. So I think we need a break after that one, but it's a never say never idea.
And from a relationship building standpoint, I have to imagine the people you've met, and after 13 years of doing it, I assume it's translated into Studio Gray and not only your repertoire, but probably the connections and future jobs. I mean, has it been a major feeder for sales, or how have you benefited, other than it's obviously your innovation and all the, design creativity that you get to have, which alone is great, but I'm guessing you've gotten a lot more out of it as a whole. Is that accurate?
I think so. I mean, I guess I'd have to really look back and see kind of what transpired from that. I think for the residential design that we do is kind of been, people see that we've done TV and they're like, oh, that's so awesome. And so it kind of might, persuade people to, yes, if it's between you, Studio Gray, and another firm or something, they might think they've done TV work. I can see all this work that they've done on all different scales. It kind of tips the, scales in our direction. I think it's more of just people love to see TV on there. And so they just think it's kind of a cool nod. It's a fun story behind it. And I think with just some of the groups that I still talk with, it's more like, hey, if you know of somebody out here looking to do a, hotel renovation or something, have them give us a call. So I think it's just being able to have those different, colleagues in different states will benefit us in the long run.
Well, I guess we're here now. Tell us a little bit about how you started Studio Gray, where you were before, and what led you to be, an entrepreneur. Like, when did you say, you know what? Because I always find it really interesting, being one myself, is like everyone has a different path. Sometimes
Totally.
we say, it's you were forced in it, like, meaning like your personality was such that, man, I'm not working for someone else. That was my experience. Like, I've got to work for myself. Or,
Well, and once you do, you can't really go back. So
yeah. I mean, well, have you ever thought, because how long have you had Studio Gray?
we are going to be 11, next month.
Congratulations.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever thought in your 11 years, have you ever gotten to a point where you're sort of burned out and you're like, you know what? I'm just going to go work for someone else. And then you spend like a week talking to your family and friends, speaking for someone, a friend of mine. And it's like,
he's in the room.
He's in the room. And I was like, man, you know what? It's been 20 years. I'm just kind of burned out. And so then you kind of look around, you kind of think about it. And then all your family and friends are like, you went last 2 days in corporate America. After. So have you had a similar process like that?
I mean, I definitely know I wouldn't make it in corporate America for sure. But even on a smaller scale, there's definitely moments in time where I'm like, oh, it'd just be so much easier to go work for somebody else and not have to go through this grind. But I would say it's not even a week of time. It's maybe like 20 minutes where I'm like, no, I couldn't. Like, I don't want to quit. And I don't think it's about quitting. It's more just like, I want to prove to myself I can do this and show that I can do this because I love what I do. Like, I do it because I want to. And just some weeks are harder than others, but I think that's the fun and the excitement of it. And just kind of the constant always thinking about like what's next, what's new, what can be different. And I think that's kind of that entrepreneurial mindset of always striving for the next thing.
I haven't thought about it before until you just made this hand motion that put a different word in my mind. You often hear about someone that has drive. They have drive. It could be sports, could be entrepreneurship, like we're talking about. But and I think drive will get you a long ways, and I think you have to have it, honestly. But I think pull, like if you love something, like I'm thinking like off in the distance in this image, right? Like the love of the craft or the love of whatever is sort of pulling you towards this idea. And I think if you pair love with drive, I mean, that's a winning formula.
Yeah. I mean, I hope so. Right. I mean, that kind of answers maybe your first question is how I even got into it. And, I've always really liked design. My dad owned an advertising typography business and it just did really well at it. And I think that kind of design is sort of ingrained in me a little bit. So I got to go to his company and kind of see him succeed at this was really cool. And so I think I always knew I wanted to start a company. I didn't necessarily know what it was. Fell into design probably senior year of high school, did some internships or like programs that you could do and realized I wanted to go into interior design. So long story short, ended up at a firm, my first job, and loved it, loved the project type, loved the people, just really loved it and wanted to do well and worked my butt off, like just constantly. And, through recessions and all this, you kind of had to pull your weight because, people they were losing their jobs. So there wasn't a lot of bandwidth within these firms. And so I was just working hard. It was just many, many, many hours on end. And part of it is I probably did it to myself because I really wanted to have a successful project for the clients. And, it wasn't always just for myself. I wanted to do well for them. And just one day after many, many years, I found I started to get burned out. I was like, I am not happy with what I'm doing. I want to walk away from this. And that was like sirens went off in my head. Like, what is that? Because you love what you do. Something's got to change. And so I would say about a year in the making, it took me to kind of decide to eventually, talk to my boss at the time and say, I think I need to move on. I realized I either need to go somewhere else, apply for a new job. I need to just go on my own and take a break for a little bit, or maybe now's the time to start my company.
Were you doing residential or commercial at that time?
Commercial.
Okay.
Yep. So my career is in commercial design. Residential has always kind of been on that side work.
Yep.
And so at the commercial firm, I was doing, smaller residences or, friends of friends or the television show work and, very little commercial design of, friends of friends, they need a refresh. So I had some stuff on the side that financially would have pulled me through, for at least a year or so. So after doing kind of the math and the sort of business plan and talking to people about how do you even start a business, like I don't have a formal training or background in that.
It seems like most entrepreneurs do not.
No. So I was like, who can I ask and kind of talk to make sure that I'm at least starting off on a proper foot, maybe not the right foot, but at least the step in the right direction. So a year into that, my boyfriend, but now husband, at the time was like, now you got to do it because I can see it in you. Like you are not happy and it's not like you to be that way about your work. And then just decided Studio Gray was formed. And I thought if I can make it 3 years, I'll be really happy. And now we're coming on 11 years. So hopefully we're doing something right here.
2 questions out of that. One is, how did you pick Studio Gray to be the name?
So I am not Amanda Gray, as some people think is my name. It is not. It's meant to represent a team effort. I think I've always seen these firms that always put their name on the door. Nothing wrong with that at all. I just knew it wasn't for me in the way that I wanted to run my business and treat it more as a leadership opportunity instead of like an ownership opportunity. So the gray kind of came into talking with my husband. I was just like, well, he's like, what do you want it to be? I was like, well, we're not just doing modern design. We're not just doing hotels. We're not just doing restaurants. We're not just doing houses. It's kind of everything in between. It's like that gray area. It's not just black and white. And he's like, okay, so kind of feed on that a little bit. And I'm like, it really is about the team. It's not just me. It's not just you. It's kind of that everything in between. So the gray just kind of felt like a neutral balance to what the company could be as it grows. So it allows it to, I think, withstand the test of time and being sort of that neutral color. And then sticking with the E in the gray is just a nod to my own heritage, just being, Norwegian, Scandinavian. It's kind of taking on that European spelling of it. And it allows us to be not just an interior design company, not just an architecture company, not just a branding company. It allows people to, I think, explore a little bit more about who we are. And so we can be all these different facets for them.
I love how colorful an answer that was for
a very bland word.
For the gray. Well, I love all the nuances of it because you took a common symbol of oh, that's a gray area, which normally the way we would speak, if something is kind of gray, it's unclear, it's undecided, I want definition. What is it? Mm-hmm. And you've taken it almost like, the way I'm interpreting it anyway, is more imaginative. It could be anything. Mm-hmm. It's in the gray, it's in the cloud, you can't see it, but it could be a mountain, it could be an mm-hmm. airplane, it could be the Sistine Chapel, it could 100%. Be anything you want. Mm-hmm. I think that's very creative. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
Out of curiosity, was the firm that you worked before, was that named? Was their name on the name of the company on the door?
It did, but I think there's just in Minnesota, almost 99%
I was just
of them.
Wondering
Yes,
if that informed your decision, because I've spoken many times in the podcast. I wish I did not name my company Mark D. Williams Custom Homes. I wish someone had pulled me aside at a 23-year-old, and said, hey, maybe your name, maybe think bigger than that. And anyway.
Maybe a little bit. I think the end goal was just knowing for whoever does come to work with Studio Gray, I want them to feel like they have purpose there, or they have a say in what happens at that company, which they do. I think if my name are on the door, it feels less about them and it's more just all about me. And it's not all about me. I don't do all the work every day. My team is amazing and they come up with the ideas and we work collaboratively and collectively to come up with these designs. It shouldn't just be my name on the door. It should be everyone's. And so I really wanted, future employees to feel like they actually can make a difference at this company, and smaller companies, you get that opportunity.
I was going to save this for later in the interview, but I think we'll do it now. Just you're talking about your team. And it was one of your team members that reached out to me. Out of curiosity, was it your team member that's approached you and said, hey, Amanda, I think you should go on the Curious Builder? Or did you know who we were here locally?
It was her. It was my teammate. I've done some smaller public speaking things, and I get nervous, I think, as some people do, but I love it. I used to do dance for many, many years, kickline and jazz and hip hop and all the stuff growing up. So taking this very shy girl and putting her up on a stage where she has to perform in front of a bunch of people took me out of that shell and allowed me to get used to public speaking or being in front of people. And so the larger the group is almost better, than smaller groups. I feel like it's too much pressure that way.
That's a great perspective. I think you're right. I think when it's small, there's more intimacy, which is a different group dynamic mm-hmm. and very good.
Yeah.
But it's just different.
Mm-hmm.
And almost when you get to a big group, it becomes less personal because everyone just sort of blends into the sea.
Yeah.
Where I was going with this is I was in preparation for the interview just on your team website. And for anyone that hasn't seen it, go to studiogray.com, I assume. And
studiograydesign.com.
design.com.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll have it in the show notes later as well. But I loved your Q&A for each one of your people. It was really playful. I've noticed that in researching. We had a building builder on recently, and his was like, project manager was like, lead ninja, or just playful words, right? Like,
Yes.
you can take your craft seriously and not take yourself seriously. And I like
100%.
that. And what I really appreciate about yours is they had these really fun questions like, my name is Amanda and my favorite drink is, and then it'd be, bubble tea, or whatever it is. And then you had these fun little lead-in questions that allowed someone, because one of the biggest challenges we have as entrepreneurs is there are a lot of good designers. There are a lot of good builders. There are a lot of good architects. How do you establish relationship and connection so that someone picks up the phone, a client, and calls you? And you maybe only have that one call to convey warmth and all these different things. But I find that reading about people's team tells you a lot. And I'm actually changing some of my portfolio for my employees after reading yours.
Oh, wow.
I've applied the new names because of this other builder. And now I want to do Q&A because I just think it's so fun and playful. And it is. Anyway, I just liked it a lot.
Yeah. And it's not like it's anything new. It's just what we want to show people is that we are humans. Okay. We don't take ourselves too seriously. We take your project seriously, but we also want people to have fun while they're doing it because it's stressful. It costs a lot of money. It's a long time to deal with this. There's stresses that are going to happen, but it's just trying to show that like this can at least be a fun process with a team like us because we want to make it more of that personal experience. So getting to have people call you back is more of it's this personal level we take with it. You're not just another number coming through our door. Your project won't be a rinse and repeat mentality. It's not going to look the same as anyone else's. It is really about making it about that client and showing that we're listening to them and we're personal on, maybe, hey, you mentioned you have a dog. And so just a little gift we're going to send you as a dog treat of some kind. It's just showing that like, we're here to listen. We're going to communicate efficiently. And that's what's going to help, get clients in the door is just showing, our honesty and just how human we are.
I love that. I want to talk a lot about brand and hospitality with you. But before we get there, I'm, as being a custom home builder in the space, I'm very familiar with interior designers on the residential level. I'm really curious to know what is the same and what is different from commercial. And I would imagine, those that are educated are probably like, oh, Mark, that's a dumb question. I know the answer. And I think a lot of people have stereotypes about designers just in general. So I would just love to hear from you. What is the difference? Because it seems like, is it analogous? Because I just had lunch with some architects yesterday, and they had mentioned that most architect firms or, solo practitioners or however it is usually, it's 95-5. So it's 95% of it is either all commercial with maybe a few side projects that are residential, or the flip, 95 residential with 5%. What is the commercial and interior design split? Not only for you, but speak maybe more to the whole industry as a whole, and then maybe talk a little bit about the differences.
Yeah. I mean, for Studio Gray's purposes, we probably do 99% commercial. I think we're not against doing residential at all. I mean, I think we're actively actually looking for builders to do things because we used to probably be more 50-50 split commercial to residential design for projects. And just over time, our commercial work has taken off, which was always the goal. But we still want to keep some of that residential in the mix because they are very different. Commercial is, if I had to say anything, it's almost a lot more technical, or just you have to know different fire codes. You have to know different, accessibility codes for, guests in wheelchairs or hard of hearing, hard of seeing. So you have to be mindful of different ratings and codes on a city level, on a commercial level, on a safety level. And so you have to know a little bit more about products that can be used in those environments, especially in food safety areas. So like restaurants and kitchens, you can't just put anything in there. It has to be a certain rating. And then just the durability. I think knowing what commercial products are going to be used, from the furniture to the flooring to the wall surfaces, what's going to help with acoustics. So there's just a lot of different things that kind of get added into commercial spaces that maybe don't in residential. And vice versa. Residential, you have almost a little bit more leeway in some of those design elements, but it's also, it can be restricting because I think residentially, homeowners, it's their home. This is a very personal space to them. Commercial, sometimes is less personal because it's more about a business owned piece, or, it can be. And so I think just seeing the different dynamics between clients from commercial to residential is different, whether it's good or bad. It's all, dependent on how it's all going with that process or that project. But I think just knowing that it's easier for us to do commercial work and know all the rules and the regulations, and then do residential as a side, because it's just a little bit more of an easy process. As designers, I would say, you still have to know the technical stuff and be able to draw things and know what lighting specs to use. So there's still things that residential designers who do that all day long, they know their stuff, they know their product. But I think where the weird hiccup is interior designers don't like to be called decorators. Nothing against decorators at all, but designers go to school for a degree, or you've learned certain things, or you have to pass certain tests. So it's just knowing, like, we're not here just to pick paint colors. That's a very small part of our job. Like, we're drafting these construction sets, we're doing all this stuff, whether it is commercial or residential. We're diving into all these details and nuances of how to actually make something, how to actually build something, so that when it's given to the construction crew, they can actually do it. It's not just pretend. So I don't know if I've even answered that question.
No, that was really helpful. And I think a couple of things came out of that. One of the things that, and well, I guess we'll go back to that later, regarding architect. So not having ever built anything commercial, how much of it is I always would have thought that an architect who, I think in the commercial world, you have to have an architect on it and they have to be licensed, where obviously you can build a house with an architect, a home designer, or a draftsman, and then you can get engineering as a third party, things like that. But I was just talking to someone who's in the commercial space today. I didn't know that. And one of the questions along with that is, I would think that an architect would either keep some design in-house. So I wonder, one of my questions here is, how often when you're working with architects, do they already have design that they've already kind of spec'd out? You mentioned a lot of the safety stuff, and my mind was thinking, well, I'm surprised the architect did spec this, that, and another thing. Or is it more of a relationship where the architect will say, well, obviously this has to meet, ADA regulations, and you already know some of the products, they're not actually specking out that exact thing. Walk us through a little bit that relationship between the architect and, your design firm.
I mean, it is a collaborative effort. We don't have that in-house architect yet. Our goal has always been to have that in-house. So for now, we contract that in. So we will do, the drawings, we will do all the specs, the layouts, the, specifications of things. But where we bring in our architectural partners is more on the level of the final code check. Like, they've gone to school for that. They have the degree for it. They are licensed for a reason. We are not, we are not architects, but they're going to take it that step further and know a little bit more of those tricks of the trade, or like where we need to go in for city, zoning. It's just, there's a different level of understanding and knowledge that they do have beyond an interior designer. But interior designers as a whole, especially ones that have their license, their NCIDQ license, which is a test that designers take, you get licensed to a point where you can sign your own drawings in certain states where you're not an architect. So we still have to know codes. We still have to know, how many exits you need in a building based on your occupancy type. We still have to know certain size restrictions of things. So we definitely have a level of understanding. We learn some of the similar things in school, but architecture obviously takes it, years beyond what we do. And so when you work with those teams, it really is this collaborative effort. Some architects are just very technical and they kind of want to just like do a little bit more of the drafting or the signing or the project management. And some architects want to design more. So it depends on who we're working with. Some might just want to say, hey, give me your drawings. I'll redline them, get them signed for you, put the stamp on there. You guys run with it. I'll step in when needed. And other design or architects that act more as designers with us. And so it is more of that collaborative approach.
What % of your work is coming where a client is coming to you and signing Studio Gray on, and then you're either providing a reference or an architect, versus an architect calling upon you?
I would say 90% we are the ones with the project. Yep. Wow. And we will bring in our contracts. And there are some commercial projects where we won't need an architect to. If it is more of a refresh where it's not really changing any, the use or the, if we're not knocking down walls, adding electrical, there's no inspections needed, you can get by, without it. But I would say 90% of it, we have to outsource that, which is why we want that architect in-house, just to, I think, streamline our own internal efforts. Our clients, we're are none the wiser to it. They know who our architectural partners are, but they don't recognize that it's like with different firms. So when someone comes to us, you can come to us and we can take care of all of those things, from architecture to interior design to those brand elements, just to make sure you have kind of this full circle design that's in-house at a firm, no matter who the partners are that we're bringing into it. But we will help guide that process along the entire way to make sure that it's working from beginning to end to be successful for that client.
One of the things that I was really interested in is, and mainly just because, and I've spoken about it on the podcast previously, is we went through a brand refresh and a brand change in terms of, name, logos, color suites, and obviously we launched the Curious Builder as well. And so I'm really into brand. And I noticed on your website that one of the first things you do in your process, I think it was under the category of what makes you different, is, let's say, a company comes in, or a restaurant or whatever, that they're really focused on how is their brand being conveyed into the design. And I think that's a genius question. And then when you said that, it just dawned on me that, in a residential home, there's not really a brand, but there are personalities.
Mm-hmm.
And, a lot of times, like, I'll look back at a home and I'll be like, oh, that has the Johnson's personality all over it. Like, that's their personality came out. I feel like we did a good job if the home feels like the client. Yeah, but it's a three-way split, right? You have the designer, architect, the builder. Everyone sort of has an influence on that. Or am I wrong in thinking that maybe a commercial space, you have a restaurant, we'll use it as an example. Hey, here's our method, here's our menu, here's who we're trying to connect with, here's the brand. And then you are trying to walk us through that, because I think I'm really interested to hear how your process goes, how you think about it. And let's just speak about brand a little bit, because I think that regardless of what business you're in, we don't spend enough time thinking about brand. I know I certainly did not until just recently.
Yeah, I mean, we are brand first. Like, that's what we want to know about. Our first questions are going to be, do you have a name? Do you have an idea? What's your sort of business plan behind what you're trying to create? And we'll ask the questions like, tell us what you want people to feel in the space. What is the end goal or emotions that you want people to feel while they're in there? With restaurants, it's easy to talk about, like, do you want people to stay longer? Do you want them to stay and have another drink? Do you want it to be really dim and dark so it's more intimate? Do you want people to kind of just churn and burn, get them out of the seats and move along? So it's really about finding what they want their guests to experience and learn what that brand is all about. Like, give us those buzzwords, give us the ideas of like what that name means to you on a personal level. And we're taking that knowledge almost as, psychologists and trying to interpret that into an actual physical space. So the designs come second to what the brand wants to get that outcome, to get all five senses in this more experiential design outcome by learning what that brand wants to be. And I think that kind of sets us apart too, because now we're coming into each project with a different lens, a different view. Sure, we know like the expert and the knowledge that we have has to go through a certain amount of programming stuff beyond that. But what does that brand want is going to help dictate what comes out of it or what it starts with. And so we try to make sure that we're always thinking of that throughout the process, instead of like, why did we, pick that chair? Why is that tabletop this color? Why is that reception desk this stone? It all has a story behind it that feeds into the brand. I think with residentially, I think sometimes people forget to tell their story. They forget to share their story in their homes. So with the commercial, you really get to enhance those brands and hope that you're making it successful for not only the brand as a whole, but the end user, the employees that work there, the front of house and back of house groups that are going to be there, just making sure that it's the most successful that it can be all around.
I really appreciate that answer. I feel like it's very synergistic with our next topic, which is going to be hospitality. But I want to ask you a question about brand. How often are your clients coming in with their brand fully developed? They've gone with maybe a brand strategist, like they have their color suites, their logos, they've already identified all of the questions you have, versus how often are you really they're coming to you with like a blank slate saying, hey, this is what we want. And you're like, have you thought? And then like basically you're acting as the role of the brand strategist.
I would say most clients will come with a logo, with a name, with sort of an identity in the beginning, or they've worked with, a actual, marketing design firm. So, I mean, they're obviously great at doing that. I mean, it's great when we can collaborate with those teams. So when our clients come with a group and they're like, hey, here's our marketing team, here's what they've created. Now we're taking this and we're enhancing that. And we're thinking about what they've strategized from the beginning and how we're going to interpret that into that physical space, into that design, to take it from kind of this visual and this idea and this color palette, and how we translate that to an interior or exterior space. And it's not just, you have red in your color palette, so we're going to put that red on the furniture. It doesn't work that way. So we're really still trying to understand where they got to where they got, from the beginning to where they got to now, and then kind of asking still more of those questions to really push the drive into that human kind of psyche side of it.
Do you have any stories come to mind about like a really fun brand that you were able to sort of accent, or anything that sort of was just, that was really unique and you could have sort of really shined a spotlight on that experience and it was all related to brand?
So we actually got to work on kind of a brand concept recently where they did come to us. They had a name. They kind of had the idea of what they wanted it to be, but we were there to help build their brand packet. So if this becomes a 1 location versus 10 locations, they kind of have that guidebook to bring to all the different areas or the different franchisees if they end up going that route. But with their local location, I don't want to say a name yet because I didn't ask their permission, so I'm going to be respectful of them. But I'll talk about it and hopefully share it later afterwards. But it's a fun space. A lot of people probably know it here. And it really was taking this kind of eccentric space and giving it new life and new energy, but in more of a refined way. So it's taking something that is eccentric and trying to make it a little bit more relatable, a little bit more refined, still have some high energy for kids and families, but also something that could be more of like an adult date night or kind of a fun casual get together. So it was really trying to redefine an existing brand and change it into this new one with a very specific styled building.
This episode is brought to you by Adaptive, the software for builders that automates draws, budgets, and bookkeeping with AI. For over a year now, I've been partnered with Adaptive, and they've just been an amazing game changer in terms of efficiency in our time and all our bookkeeping. From the time we get an invoice, we import it into their system. The AI codes it, cost codes it, job codes it. All we have to do is review it, pass it through the people internally in the office, all digitally, and then it gets approved and paid all via ACH. It's becoming extremely fast and saving us countless hours a day and a week. When it comes to draws, all of our budgets now are set in Adaptive as well. So now when we cost code against the draws, we can do our change orders, and then with a click of a button, we can submit these draws to our title companies or to our homeowners for faster payment. If you're looking to save time, and if you're looking to be accurate, I highly recommend Adaptive. Additionally, if you'd like to listen to one of their founders share the story of Adaptive, you can listen to episode number 15 on the Curious Builder podcast. This episode is brought to you by Pella Northland. For 19.5 years, I've been building homes, and 95% of all of my homes have used Pella windows. I couldn't be happier to call them a partner in our builds and our remodels. Whether you're an architect, a designer, or a remodeler, I'd highly recommend Pella windows. They can fit old homes, new homes, reclaimed, commercial, and really everything in between. Pella is a company that we trust and that we recommend to our clients. Additionally, in management, Peter and Ed have just been absolute fantastic people to work with, as well as mentors to me personally. So when it comes time to look for a window, I'd highly recommend Pella Windows. Find more at pellanorthland.com. Also, if you're interested, you can hear episode 1 where I interview Peter and Ed together for a great listen on business and Pella Windows.
It was just fun. It was energy. It was like just really fun color palettes getting to mix in there and kind of helping build on, these, dog infused ideas where it's like, well, we want pets to come here. So it's like, we just got to stretch our kind of design brains a little bit more with this one.
More creative.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's talk a little bit about hospitality. And I mean, because I often think of hospitality in association with, of course, restaurants and hotels. I'm personally trying to figure out a way to develop, I'm calling it a hospitality menu or experience, where from the first 15-minute discovery call I have with a client to 1 year after they move in, I would have it all sort of mapped out. And I'm actually going to be interviewing some restaurateurs for this kind of both the Curious Builder thing as well as the Mark Williams custom homes things. I'm just really fascinated about it. I'm listening to a book right now called Unreasonable Hospitality, and it's a fantastic book. And but anyway, with that intro, tell us a little bit about how brand and hospitality sort of play together, and what are some of your thoughts on what does hospitality mean, not only from Studio Gray's point of view to your client, the commercial client, but also thinking about the hospitality of the end user, the client of your client.
I mean, when people think about hospitality, you think of restaurants or hotels. So if you kind of take that mindset to it, which we try to infuse in every project that we do, whether it's a residence or, a workplace, an office building or something, we want to make sure that we're instilling that idea of hospitality. And that is essentially creating a space for people to feel welcome, to feel like you've thought of things before they even knew they needed it. It's almost like a concierge service at a hotel is what we should be to the client to build on that hospitality side of it. So really making sure that you're thinking about how people use the space, how they navigate the space, or how you can help direct that experience for them is just going to help infuse that like hospitality presence, because people are just going to feel good about being in there and then having good customer service or, an approachable front desk, or the signage is easy to read. Like it comes down to every little piece of the puzzle that's in there that just shows either the employee, the tenant, the homeowner, the restaurant guest that every little thing has been thought about from the moment you enter to the restrooms to the minute you leave or to the takeaway that you bring with you, that marketing material. You want to make sure all those things are thought about. And in my mind, that's sort of that hospitality presence where it's a personal experience for everyone. And you feel like you have someone there to either help you along the way or guide you, or there's resources that have already been thought about and provided to you. So it just becomes this, I don't know, really like personalized, just like a good feeling, like people just feel good about being in those spaces. And so I think the hospitality, how that relates then from us to our clients is that just personal partnership. Like you come to the door and it's like, hey, what do you like to drink? We always want to have snacks or beverages at our meetings. Like any allergies, like let's talk about, food and coffee. Like, that's like being at a kitchen in someone's home. Like you tend to congregate around the kitchen. So how can we give that sort of feeling with our clients when they come to our doors or they're coming to our meetings? And just making sure that they know we're listening. They know we're thinking about what could be better or what could help this process be a little bit better, so that it's really just making people feel welcome and like they're, the most important guest there.
Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to think now. That was a phenomenal answer. I'm thinking about what hospitality means to me. And I think it's just thinking out loud here is it's a feeling of familiarity. It's a feeling of comfort, at ease. I'm thinking about restaurants in particular right now. Why, like my personal preference, and it's just my personality, I like a restaurant that is maybe a little dimmer, a little darker, a little more intimate. I can't stand a really loud restaurant. I would rather have a smaller, more intimate setting where it's quieter. And because I have 3 little kids, that if I do go on a day night, like I would actually like to stay there for a little while.
Yep.
But then I think of like the places that do so well. Like I often frequent Yum Bakery. There's 2-3 locations, and but kind of that fast casual dining, but it's like really good food. They do it really quickly, and yet they kind of knock. And it seems like as a business enterprise, it seems to me that they kill it. Like that when you go really high end, people save it for a date night. And so I wonder how they get enough frequency to make it work. And so
it's about how they present it to you too. I mean, they're showing thoughtfulness in how they package the food to you or plate it. So it's just all those little things are just little touches of hospitality that help that whole experience that you're getting wherever you are.
I heard one recently. What was in the book I just told you about, where it was this, it's a very famous restaurant in New York, and I think it was the maitre d' someone heard that this couple had never seen snow before. It was snowing, so he told the front house to go buy a sled at a local, hardware store or whatever. And they brought the sled to the restaurant and they gave it to the couple having dinner so they could take their son and go sledding. And when I heard that story, I was just like, wow. Because
Mm-hmm.
to me, hospitality is thoughtfulness.
Yeah.
And I don't consider myself a very thoughtful person. My wife is extremely thoughtful. And so
Balance.
yeah. And I really appreciate people that consider others and are really thoughtful and they think about their experience. And
Mm-hmm.
it's a different objective, a different mindset. And I think you mentioned the team approach. I think for anyone who's running any business to spend some time thinking about what is hospitality, what is thoughtfulness,
Mm-hmm.
and it doesn't have to be some grand gesture either. I bet that sled cost
Yeah. I mean, not everyone
$30.
can buy a sled,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it is just being there to listen and to think, and I guess ask the questions too, like even along the way, like what could be different, or how's the process going so far for you? What could we do differently? What could maybe help out in our communication style with you? Because everyone is different on that too. Like we over communicate and want to make sure people know what we're doing, even if we're going to go quiet for a week and work. We still want to make sure they hear it. But some people are like, I just need a phone call. So it's like asking the questions and just being mindful that we're all different. Everyone works differently. Everyone has a different, outcome of what they want. So you just got to be able to ask those questions too, while being mindful and thoughtful along the way, that you want people to feel like you're doing them a good service, you're doing them justice, you're doing the job justice, and just making sure that they know that we do care about this project at the end of the day. If it's not successful, we haven't done our job at all.
This again is maybe biased because I'm a man and I don't consider myself thoughtful, and most of the women in my life I consider very thoughtful, but I don't think most people would argue with me if I said women in general as a stereotype are more thoughtful. I think it's a very flattering stereotype. Do you think I'm wrong as being a woman, or do you think I'm right?
I think it just depends on the person.
Okay.
Definitely. I've just seen all sides. I mean, maybe stereotypically, yes, you could say that. I think, women's brains and men's brains work differently. So I think women are, more ingrained to listen more, I think, and kind of hear some of this stuff versus speak more. So I think, and maybe you've, been taught that over evolution. I don't know. But I think that's, if anything, a benefit to us, where we are there to listen a little bit more, and we're here to kind of understand it and make sure that we are reacting in a good way. But you have that on both men and women side, so I can't say for certain.
It's not that I don't know thoughtful men. I certainly do. I work with a number of architects, and they're very thoughtful men. So it's not that. But I think of I often think when I'm choosing an interior design firm residentially, they're predominantly women. I think I've had one man interior designer, and most of them have been women. And I really appreciate, and maybe it's because building is such a male dominated industry, that I just want more women in building, period. My daughter would be a phenomenal business owner, whether she decides to be in construction or building or anything. Awesome. She would just be great. But I'm thinking about those in my mind. Some of them have had on the podcast as well as guests that own their business. And I just really appreciate, I guess I never thought about this before. I think it's the fact of this hospitality thing. I feel like more so than, and everyone has a valuable part to play, the architect, the builder, the trade partners, but I feel like more so than anyone else on the building process with a client in mind, I feel like the interior designers, I feel like they connect to the homeowners, in my case, better than most other people. And I feel like they demonstrate the way that they care through listening. And really, I always call them kind of my temperature. Like I'll often call my interior designers, and I'll just check in and say, how are the Johnsons doing? It's funny because I've never actually built for any Johnson. I've used that name twice. There's
a lot of them here. It could be anyone.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll say, how are the Johnsons? And they're like, I think they could use, a check-in, or I feel like they could use a little pick-me-up, or they're doing great. They're doing awesome. Okay, I can give them some space. I just feel like they are better at responding, like gauging the temperature of my client. So I've used kind of that as my hospitality check-in without even thinking about it, I guess, just to see like, how is the client doing?
Yeah. And I mean, it is part of the course in interior design. You have to learn color study and color theory and, take psychology classes and stuff. So there's an understanding of what certain things, especially in different cultures, like give to people, emotionally. So everything that you create in a space does have a direct reflection about how that can affect your mood that day or change you. So I think there is a level of psychology in a way that kind of goes within the interior design industry, that you have to be perceptive to that. You have to understand how that could make people feel, or at least to be successful at it. You kind of have to think about those things. And maybe that's to my benefit. I was either going to be an interior designer or I wanted to go for psychology. So I don't know. I feel like I, got that in interior design, because there's plenty of times where I'm like, wow, we are a therapist today, which is fine. If we need to be that, we will be that, because as I said earlier, like, projects are stressful and they cost a lot of money. And if it doesn't go smoothly, it could cost more money. So it's really just trying to talk people off that ledge, or not convince them, but just assure them that this will be fine. Let's stick with it. Let's see, or don't change everything yet. Like, let's see how this goes or pans out, and trust the process.
I've often romanticized what I think commercial building is like, that because residential is extremely emotional, right? It's B2C, and it's a home, it's their personal space. And so I just feel like lately I'm just like, oh, wow, everyone just has a lot of feelings right now.
Yes.
And it's just a lot. And sometimes you're like, oh man, I would love to just work for a business. Like, hey, you build me this space, and they want to make money. They want to run a business. Here's the expectations. Do it. Now I understand the consequences. If you don't, liquidated damages, and there's a dark side of this coin, I'm sure too. From your point of view, being a commercial designer, what do you think there's less emotions? I mean, you just mentioned some of the, if I didn't know earlier in an interview that you were, a commercial designer, your answer is almost identical to a residential designer. So is my assumption that commercial design is less emotional than residential inaccurate? Or what's your thoughts on that?
I think it's a different type of emotion. I mean, people's homes are where they're going to live. They want it to work well. So there's a level of emotion of, am I making the right choice on a paint color? That alone in residential design is one of the hardest things ever. Just a paint color. Commercially, they barely even look at the paint color. They're focused more on the durability of the flooring, or the countertop, or the function of the IT in the room. So there's different focuses on different things, and the emotion, I think, comes from more of a narrow it down to more of a financial emotion part of it, because every little thing is going to cost more money. It's a little bit more of this personal investment if it's an entrepreneur, first time restaurateur, whatever it may be. So there's definitely emotion in plenty of commercial spaces. It's just a different type, because residentially, that is your break from your commercial life. That's when you go home and you're going to stay there and you're done working for the day. You want that mental reprieve there, versus the commercial. It needs to function, and it's got to be successful, and it's got to make sure that we're meeting what we think we need to meet and what we should meet for, the guest or the tenant. So it's just different emotions.
Still emotional. Well, then I guess I'll stay being
still emotional.
Still emotional. I guess I can't escape to
maybe we're more emotional, and it's like, oh my
god. When you build for a couple, usually they're pretty aligned, meaning the husband and wife. If you're building for a couple, usually, if they're not, that's going to be a problem. But that's actually we won't go in this podcast on that. Recently I was interviewed by somebody else, and we all went around the room and talked about our red flags, and the biggest one for most of us was, how do they treat each other? But my question for you in the commercial space is, and not knowing much about it, so I'm just going to take a leap of stereotypes here. Like, let's say you have a star chef, and he's or she is being brought in to, create the menu, they're whatever. But then you have the commercial developer, if they're not the same, and they are, walk us through these partnerships. Like, they're coming to you in the brand. Now they've likely done the whole brand thing. Are they usually pretty aligned? Have you sensed like sometimes they're not aligned, and how do you navigate that?
I mean, yes and no. There's going to be times where people just aren't seeing eye to eye, or their goals are different, whether it could be more of a, a franchise, the ownership to a franchisee or stuff like that, where there's going to be different cooks in the kitchen who have a different agenda. And so our goal is to really find that happy medium to make sure that we're meeting the expectations of one and also the other, and kind of showing where we need to kind of agree on certain things. And, maybe we won't exactly love this for this, option here, but here's how we could tweak it and make it fit both of your needs. And I think it's the same thing residentially. Even if the homeowners, butt heads, you have to find sort of that balance in between to make sure that both parties feel like they're winning at the end of the day, or that they're being heard at the end of the day. So yeah, we deal with a lot of different developers, to operations, to the front of house, the general manager, to the cook line. I mean, everyone involved, down to the bank, has a say in these projects. And so you just have to be mindful of what the goal is, what the final agenda is for everyone, and how to get there, and try to, appease all parties along the way, or show why something can't be met and how we can come up with another solution for it. So it's never a, no, we can't do it. It's a, okay, maybe not this, but here's what maybe we can all work together to find another solution for. Let's talk about X, Y, and Z.
Do you find, do you have to get multiple, let's say they come to you, do they usually say, hey, here's our budget, design something, versus design something, let's price it out and see where it's at?
No, usually it's like, here's our budget, or...
I like your laugh. I was like, no.
I mean, if only. No, and I mean, there's been some places where like, well, we don't really know what it is, and it can shoot you or them in the foot. It's like, well, people's expectations of dollars were, oh, we don't have much, and it's way different than somebody who says, well, I have a lot. It just, people's perspectives are very different, and I've learned that over time, good and bad. And so I always ask the budget question in the beginning. Again, this is a relationship. We need to build on trust. We need to build on communication. We can't do our job if we don't know what your budget goal is, because we're going to know if we need to design something to the nines and over embellish this millwork, or, pick a higher end chair. We have more options to pull from because the price point is higher, versus like, hey, we got to figure out how to still create this amazing high end looking design, but we've got to do it a little bit faster. We've got to limit the sort of embellishments that we add into it to make sure that we're meeting that budget. So usually it's here's what we've got. How can we all break that down? And so we'll look at it with the team and figure out, okay, square footage costs, furniture costs, what's your equipment costs, what are your opening costs? So it's really understanding, what is your all-in number versus what is your construction number versus what is your FF&E package number, and just making sure that we're asking those questions in the beginning.
How often have you had someone say, hey, my budget is, let's just pick a number, $1 million. And during the design, they keep reacting to things that are above $1 million. And you say, hey, Amanda, just remember your budget's $1 million. This is definitely going to go over. Is this what you want to do? And they're like, yeah, let's do that. I love this. I'm so excited. This is great. And so you do it, and then they do that 5-6 more times. Then you go to the final deal, and it's $2 million, or it doesn't matter for this analogy, right? 1.5, whatever. And they're like, hey, wait a minute. I told you, Studio Gray, that this was a $1 million budget. Why would you show me something that I couldn't afford? And you're like, well, I was reacting to you. I am showing you. And by the way, I told you along the line that we're moving the budget. Have you ever had something like that?
I mean, maybe a little bit, but we try really hard not to show all of the options that we probably know they're going to pick that are going to put them over budget. So I think probably the best example to explain easily on this would be like furniture options. If we're picking a dining chair for a restaurant and we know their budget, and we have dining chairs and then we have tables, we have kind of like a good, better, best mentality. So here's your price point, but here's your warranty. And then here's your higher price point, and here's your better warranty, or what comes with that. We will put like a big red note on the thing, like, you cannot pick all the expensive items on every single page or you will be over budget. You have to pick a happy medium. So we'll try to show at least a good level so that they feel like they shouldn't always pick the highest one, and they shouldn't always pick the lowest price point either. But we'll make sure we call out, if you choose all of the most expensive ones, you will be over budget. This cannot work. So at least we're calling it out. We're keeping a record of it, whether people remember that or not. We like it in writing, unfortunately, for that reason. But we try to show them something that's within reason. We're not going to show them a $2,000 dining chair and say, well, if you buy this, you could save and do the cheapest dining tables. We're not going to recommend that, because we probably don't want that to happen either. It's really about that balance. So the more people can share with us about their budget on a range, what is your max number? We're going to work backwards from that. Sometimes just stuff happens and there's unforeseen costs that come into play. And then we actually have to work backwards and say, we got to scale back on something. Yeah. Now we've got to cut back on that finish here. And we're going to go to that alternative that maybe you already saw and you did like it. Well, let's follow along those lines and maybe find you 3 options within that price point. So it's our job to make sure we're presenting something they can afford.
Yeah, I would say for myself, but I think residential construction in general, I'm not sure how great of a job we do as an industry. sometimes, we can get caught up. I know I can speak for myself. I get caught up in the design. I'm excited. I like where it's going. I would say the emotional roller coaster, what the design train is going up. Everyone's excited. It comes down pretty hard when you are, you get to pricing. And, and then I think everyone goes through.
The romantic phase is over.
The romantic phase is over. But, then it goes into, I actually can't stand the word, but everyone uses it, value engineering. And so, or if you really want to be cute, it's VE.
VE.
Yeah. Yeah. So really cute. VE. You're like, okay. So you want the same thing. You just want me to do it cheaper.
How do we make it cheaper?
Yeah, same thing. Like,
we don't say cheaper anymore. We say more economical.
Oh, yes. That's true. Yep. I do try to stay away from some of those words. Like, cheap, dollars.
Again, it's that
value.
Mental psyche of how people think about it. Like, don't spend your dollars here. Let's put the value into something else.
Along those lines, I heard something really interesting. It's been a while. And it was something like, if you, I can't stand saying price per square foot because people then that's all they can focus on.
Yes.
They can't focus on anything
It doesn't work
else.
That way.
No, but like if you do, it was interesting. Someone said, change the premise. So let's just say you pick a number. Let's say you say, hey, this home is going to be between $400 and $600 a foot. What number did you hear?
I mean, well, I know what they heard was 400.
Yes. Yeah. So, okay. You're a veteran.
I'm biased.
Yeah, you're biased. Yeah, you're biased.
I know exactly what they're hearing.
So, but I said 400 to 600. It comes in at 550. They're like, hey, I thought this was going to be 4. And you're like, what? I didn't say that. And so these are just, numbers.
I mean, a lot of people just don't know what things cost either.
No.
So that doesn't even really mean anything.
Here's interesting. And I've never tried this. The book I was listening to that was talking about it, reverse it. Tell people the number will be between 600 and 400. So you put the highest number first and you put the lowest number second.
Interesting.
I don't know if that has anything to do with our brains reading left to right or anything like that. I don't know.
It's even like why when we do floor plans or furniture options or whatever, we're doing light fixture options, we'll give a minimum of 3 because you don't feel like you're choosing between one or the other. People feel like having that third option, now you really feel like you're choosing the best option for you. So there's something about at least having 3 options that, again, we keep in our minds that we're going to try to provide that. Then 1, more options, the better. People, can choose what they think is best for them. But 2, if you had to choose between A or B, it's like, this is 50-50. It's almost like more pressure than it is if you had 3 options.
It's a third you can cast out. I mean, there is, I would say, there is a lot of work that goes into 3 separate design concepts. And I don't know how, and this would be, we don't have enough time in this podcast to figure it all out. We'll have to do part 2 with Amanda Maday in terms of, I would love to know, like you obviously have to charge for it on the front end. And maybe do you ask clients, like, do you want to see 2 or 3 options, or you just know we're always going to do 3 options? So you kind of build it into your design presentation and
we're always going to. And when we say 3 options, it could be a minor tweak of a bar from this location to the other location. The programming is typically going to be already set out, but we're going to give options to just show, like, if this, then that, and that might actually work better for what they're envisioning for it. So no matter what, you're going to get 3 options. If we do more, it's on ourselves. As long as we can do it within those time frames, like the space planning part is my favorite part. And so there, you can crank those things out quickly in a good way. And you can also, spin off and have 20 different options. And now we have to edit down to 3, which can be hard. So sometimes you'll get 5 to be like, okay, just so you know, we did explore a little bit more. We're going to look at 5 today, but it's not charging them anymore.
I do appreciate that when architects will, they'll show a 1, 2, and then you can tell they're reading the room. And obviously I kind of know where this is going because maybe we talked about it ahead of time, and I can kind of sometimes, not very often, maybe 20% of the time, they'll pull out this plan they've been working on, or like, hey, I've been testing.
Yes,
I've been testing this model.
I had a late night thought.
Yeah,
it starts with that, or an early morning, whatever your poison is.
Yeah,
yes.
I feel bad for all the people I email at 4:30. It's all these crazy ideas. Yeah,
I do that. Yes, I'm like, I should just set the auto send to 8 a.m. just so people know.
Yeah. Well, it was a wonderful pleasure to have you on. I had a bunch more questions, which we knew we would always never get to. I always kind of leave this with the end before we kind of do the extra is, what are some, I always find that entrepreneurs are always educating themselves, learning. Where do you find inspiration?
I mean, I do through like traveling, going out to eat, like in my line of work, I want to go to those places where I'm going to learn hospitality and like walk through a space and really understand what is working and what isn't. And being in customer service and my old time jobs, working in restaurants, and I cleaned hotel rooms, I worked at a golf course and was the bev cart driver. So I've always kind of been in this customer service side of it. So being able to have influence on the front of house and the back of house operations to think about all the guests really is where I want to keep learning. So going to new places and exploring, different areas to travel and stay, or, touring different offices, going to events to meet with new people and just hear different stories. That's going to continue my learning process, outside of just reading the books and doing online courses and that sort of thing. But the inspiration really comes from getting out there and exploring.
I like that. Now, I wasn't going to ask this, but now I really want to. If you were to encourage someone to go to a restaurant tonight, just assuming you could get in, to kind of just see great design, and there's so many places, so I know this is a lot of pressure because there's so many. Which restaurant would you recommend? Someone, no one is from Minnesota, and they're just going to come in, and you want and I know I'm just asking you, if you came in and you wanted a recommendation, where would you go?
I gotta shout out to our friend, our client, Ann Kim and Do Young Joni. Plus, it's right near our office.
Love that place.
It just became a good staple for even my husband and I. So I think I have kind of like a personal level there. Like we'd always just pop in there and somehow manage to get a seat at the bar with no reservation. Like we'd come in at the right time. Our food is amazing. She's wonderful. She's creative. She's talented on a lot of different levels. And again, she's a dreamer too. So I really appreciate her as a person. And so getting to experience that kind of level of hospitality in their restaurants and the food, I mean, can't go wrong with that. Like it really is just.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite places. What about a hotel? If you had to, some people are flying into town, they've got one hotel to stay in. Where would you recommend they go?
Oh my gosh, it's funny because I never really do staycations. So it's a little, I guess just because I haven't been to many here other than a lot of the corporate ones. I think if you want kind of this smaller sort of quaint space, Hotel Alma is always fun. Like it just, again, I like that sort of getaway, but it's still in the city. It's still kind of a fun experience. And it's just boutique feeling in all different levels. And then plus, stopping down the restaurant, the coffee shop is all great. I'm sure a lot of people say that. Or if you want a fun Airbnb experience, Getaway Motor Cafe and Airbnb down in Carver, Minnesota.
Really? Client
of ours. We did their Airbnb on the upper level. It's
in Carver.
In Carver.
Well, I grew up in Chaska, so Carver's pretty close. I'm really interested to check this out.
You got to go there. Old historic building. The couple's from basically lives there now, so they have the coffee shop and bar on the main level, and then we did an Airbnb on the upper level.
I don't think I've driven through Carver since I graduated high school. It's been a long time. I bet a lot's changed.
A little bit, yeah.
Alma, for those not from here in Minnesota, Alma is this incredible restaurant. My wife loves it. We usually go there for her anniversary. But upstairs, it's 4 hotel rooms? It's very small. It's a little boutique.
I think a little bit more than that.
Okay.
I don't exactly know the number off the top of my head, but I remember seeing more keys than that.
More.
But yeah, like a little hallway. It's not much, but I love that because I like things that aren't traditional, aren't the corporate sort of vibe. They're great in their own purpose, but I want more of that like unique, personalized, like one of a kind sort of destination.
I'm gonna have to start adding these to all of them if they're low. Like that's gonna be it makes me want to travel and eat tonight. Like, hey, how do you, let's get a babysitter for the kids. Let's go.
Yep, for sure.
Well, for those listening that want to reach out to you, what are some good places to find out more about Studio Gray? Yeah,
you can check out our website. It's studiograydesign.com. You can call. We can put my number in the show notes, just so people can get that way, or Amanda at studiograydesign.com is always the best way to get a hold of me.
Wonderful. Well, we'll have everything in the show notes. Thank you again for coming on. It was a pleasure to talk with you. And signing off.
This was fun. Thanks a lot.
Good. Thank you. We're excited to announce that our first live event is now on sale on our website. On May 16th at 5 o'clock in the North House in Minneapolis, the Curious Builder is going to be hosting Brad Levitt, Nick Schiffer, Tyler Grace, and Morgan Molitor to a panel discussion about networking, marketing your brand and your business, and all things related to the Contractor Coalition, which is coming to Minneapolis on May 15th through May 19th. If you're looking at leveling up your business, I'd highly recommend attending. For those local here in Minnesota, it's right in your backyard. This would be an amazing time to network with some of the nation's best builders with the best building practices around. Join us for the Contractor Coalition, or if you just want to be there for one night and enjoy the networking and meet these superstars from around the country, again, that is going to be May 16th at 5 o'clock at the North House. Tickets can be bought at the contractorcoalitionsummit.com as well as the Curious Builder Podcast.com. Thanks for listening to the Curious Builder podcast. If you like what you listen to, please give us a 5-star rating and write us a review. It really means a lot. It's a great way for us to just understand what you like about the podcast and what we can keep doing. So like and review, and please share with your friends and family. Find out more at curiousbuilderpodcast.com.